days post campaign with these efforts. And so I want to give Mayor Pete and Chasten time to speak to all of you today. And without further ado, I give it over to Mayor Pete.
All right. Well, thank you, Marcus, and thanks to a number of team members in Pete for America alumni who I know are on here too. And thanks to all of our supporters for your encouragement through the campaign and for taking some time to be with us tonight. I wish that I were traveling the country and having a chance to see you in person. Obviously, that's not possible right now. And so first and foremost, I hope that you and your loved ones are keeping safe and managing well through this change that all of us are going through as we all do our part to help fight the pandemic, even when the greater part of our responsibility is simply to stay put. I've been reflecting and speaking with people around the country on what's going on in the stakes right now, having conversations with fellow mayors, helping them to get networked to resources, talking to a lot of people who are on the front lines of solutions. And one of the things that I'm seeing is that the very things that we talked about in the campaign are more at stake today than ever. We talked a lot, as you know, about freedom, democracy, and security, and how much it mattered to have an understanding of what that means in the 21st century. And that's part of what is at stake today in the management of this situation. When it comes to freedom, all of us, of course, find our freedom constrained in new ways. But in particular, what we're finding is that communities of color and those who have been disadvantaged already by injustice and systemic discrimination in this country are less free to be able to fight the pandemic. Sometimes they're less likely to be in jobs that make it possible to telecommute, are less likely to live in a neighborhood where they would have had access over the years to the kind of grocery stores that a lot of people take for granted, which means higher rates of hypertension. One more example of how everything is connected. We're seeing our democracy on the line. Especially when you look at what happened in Wisconsin, where thankfully there was a great result in terms of a good candidate elected to the Wisconsin Supreme Court, but also some very disturbing signs of how elections can become more difficult and people can be disenfranchised if we do not vigilantly guard democracy through steps like making sure that voting by mail is available to everybody across the country as we head into November. And needless to say, all of the things we talked about in terms of a bigger, deeper vision of security. Security not as chest-thumping militarism, but getting ahead of the threats of tomorrow, whether they be cybersecurity threats, climate security threats, or global health security threats. Well, we're seeing that come to life all around us. And we're seeing the pain of living with a White House that's not prepared to keep us safe. And at the same time, also seeing leadership from around the country, often in those state and local offices that are as important as the presidency itself. That's one of the reasons why we've launched Win the Era. Which, as Marcus mentioned earlier, he's the executive director of, and it's a wonderful opportunity for us as a community of people who share the same values, the wonderful community of supporters that grew up around Pete for America, to take steps that will make a difference for the road ahead. And so I encourage you to stay in touch and look for more news via wintheera.com. If you're able right now, you could support our efforts through the website, but you'll see that the website's pretty basic as we get up and running with more information to come. The point is to help people who are stepping up to offer that critical leadership at every level of government, because one of the lessons of this challenging time we're living in is that government matters. Now, we always knew that it did, but now we're seeing just how important it is that we have the right hands on the pulleys and levers of government, with our lives really at stake. We're also seeing how much we rely on each other. Just as they say, there was an old saying from one of the world wars that there's no atheists in a foxhole. I would say there's no individualists in a pandemic. Right now, we're seeing, even as we are forced to be physically separated from each other, how much we turn to each other for everything from moral and emotional support to help getting through the economic shocks that so many people again, including or especially the most vulnerable people, are dealing with. And so, as challenging a time as this is, I also believe that this is a time that if we get this right, could bring out the best in us. And I think we're going to see innovations and moral growth, provided we step up, support one another, not just in terms of pushing for good policies and good leaders, but making sure that we make good on that sense of belonging that we talked about over and over again in the course of the campaign, because we clearly belong now to a nation that shares the same fate across different lines of geography or politics or class, and this is a time for us all to stand together. For our part, we've been hunkered down here in South Bend, like so many have, and as tough a time as this is, I'll also say that it's good to be home, both home in South Bend and literally here at home, a place we didn't see very much of during the campaign. I think there was a month where we only had one day on the ground together here in the house. And so Chasten and I have been making the most of the opportunity to spend time together and to make up for lost time in terms of the things that we wanted to do around the house and as a household. Buddy and Truman, of course, oblivious to what's going on nationally, but I think have noticed that we're home quite a bit more. And for their part, are I know really enjoying our company, but also I enjoyed how much the community supporters really lifted up our entire household, even the dogs, when I would be on the trail and ask me how they were doing. We got a special guest here. Marcus tipped our hand a little bit in order to moderate our conversation, because we gathered questions from everybody. And just like in front of thousands of people, I always said there's no circumstance where we can't have some kind of conversation. That must be true at a moment like this too. And so we're so glad that so many of you offered questions. So without further ado, let me tip it to my better half, and glad to reintroduce Chasten to everybody on the call.
Well, hello, everyone. I don't want to take up too much time. Pete said everything I've been thinking. Love to be home. Glad we had more time with the dogs and more time with this house. We've been doing a lot of house projects, really addressing some Christmas cards that went unopened for a year or so, but it's great to be home, and it's nice to join all of you here this evening. We have a ton of questions, so I'm going to jump right into it. Mayor, thanks for joining us tonight. All right, so Maria from New Mexico asks, what is the single most important thing each one of us can do to help elect Joe Biden? Thank you from your fans in New Mexico.
So, well, thanks for asking, because I think it is so important that we step forward and support Joe Biden in the November election. As you know, I made the decision to endorse him very soon after stepping out of the race myself. And it means a lot to me for this community of supporters that came together to help us in my campaign effort to be there for him too. And let me tell you part of why I made the decision quickly to support him. It's not just about what we're up against. I think if you're on this call, you know the stakes of making sure that we do not have a second term of Donald Trump. This is also about what it is that we stand for. And while we had a different vocabulary for talking about it, the issues and the values that we talked about in the rules of the road, for example, when it came to belonging, and the value we place on empathy and decency, I think that's really reflected in the Biden campaign and what he's about. So all of us have a role to play. What does that look like concretely? Well, one thing is to make sure that we're reaching out to friends and people who maybe tuned out the political process a little bit, and offer a reminder that all of the things we care about are going to be on the ballot in November. Another thing is volunteering. Obviously, that's changed. We don't have the kind of traditional door knocking and going to rallies and visibilities, at least not right now. But there are still ways to sign up through the Biden campaign website, and also through the website opportunities to chip in. You were all so generous in providing the resources that made it possible for us to travel the country and hire an incredible staff. Of course, Vice President Biden needs that too. And it's going to be critically important knowing how much effort's going in on the other side to pulling together financial resources to lend a hand there. So it'll mean a lot to me if Team Pete is there for Team Joe too. We're all in this together. And for anybody, whether they were backing me or somebody else who didn't get to go the distance, my message is, hey, I get it. I've been there. Obviously, we went in with a different idea of who we wanted to be the nominee, but the differences among us in the Democratic Party are nothing compared to the huge fundamental difference between what it will be like if we get Joe elected president and what it will be like if we have to live through another term under Donald Trump.
Great. And that kind of answered Madeline's question from Michigan, which was best way to remain involved politically during social distancing. I know our team built amazing platforms on how to engage people in your own circles, having authentic and genuine conversations with people in your life about why it's so important that we vote for Vice President Biden, because we can't afford 4 more years of Donald Trump. Zach from DC asks, how do we support LGBTQ candidates, especially for mayors and city councils down the ballot in this crucial election year?
So, one of the things that obviously meant a lot to us on this campaign was its historic nature. And there are so many out candidates who are not getting the kind of attention that we did in the presidential race. And it's very important that we be there for them. So I would, first of all, look for organizations that are committed to supporting LGBTQ candidates. The Victory Fund backed me and endorsed me in my campaign. They have identified some wonderful candidates stepping up, and we have a long way to go before our community is equally represented among elected officials. And so I definitely encourage you to look for those resources. And this is one of many kinds of diversity and pioneering leadership that we'll be considering as we roll out the people we're planning to endorse for the Win the Era effort, which is going to, I think, be an opportunity to put our values into action for the future, and another way to identify people who we believe in. I always preached in the campaign, we can't treat the presidency like it's the only office that matters. Now's the time to make good on that. And as enthusiastically as I'm backing the Biden campaign, we got to make sure we're lifting up candidates at every level.
Great. There's a lot of personal questions in here. This one I thought was interesting. Emily from West Virginia asked, in this period of transition from after the campaign to now in isolation, have there been particular books or shows that you have found helpful?
You might want to.
Well, you've been reading a lot more than I have, but I don't know if I'd say helpful. But I think it's really fun for us to just be able to binge watch things. We haven't been able to do that for years. So, but you've been reading a lot. I think we've both been enjoying Veep. We've been rewatching Veep, which is kind of too close to home now. And if you can hear all the grunts, I don't know if you can lean back a little bit. Buddy has joined us. Begrudgingly, I think he's waiting for his afternoon snuggle. Let's jump into something else. Kathy, how do I pronounce this name? Ramcharan, I think. Ramcharan from Arizona just says voting rights, voting rights, voting rights. You want to comment on that?
Amen. Yeah, it is so important right now to be there for those who are trying to defend our democracy. Again, Wisconsin is just one example of what's at stake, and we are going to be holding this up as a theme that I'll be talking about a lot in the Win the Era effort. Also, I would point to resources like Fair Fight that Stacey Abrams and supporters have been leading after the experience in Georgia. And we've got to make sure that, look, there's a lot of talk about how to protect our economy and how to protect our health in the context of the pandemic. I would add a third pillar to that. That's how to protect our democracy. America's nothing without democracy. We're not safe without democracy. And it is endangered, especially when it comes to voting rights. And so in addition to all the issues that we were already facing with voter suppression going on in so many places, this is a time when we need to be vigilant about ensuring access to the ballot. The other thing I'll point out is, remember, in our country, for better or for worse, elections are run by counties and by states. So it's one of many examples of why we need to pay much more attention to those unglamorous state and local offices where so many of these decisions are made.
Great. Did you put dinner in the oven, by the way?
I did.
Okay, thank you very much. I was going to take a brief reprieve. All right, so this is a really sweet question. Jonah from Maryland says, I'm 11 years old and I want to be someone who makes change in the world just like you. How did you know you wanted to become a politician? You rocked every debate. I agree, Jonah.
Well, first of all, Jonah, you're ahead of the curve, and I think you're ahead of where I was at your age, because I was still trying to figure out whether I wanted to be an astronaut or something else, and didn't realize how meaningful running for office could be at the time. I think there's a moment a lot of us go through when we're running for office or thinking about it, where you're watching the news, you're seeing the decisions that the people in charge make, and at a certain point you think, if that was me, I'd do it differently, and here's how I would do differently. And if you have that conversation with yourself, no matter how old you are, at the age of 11 is as good an age as any to start having that conversation with other people. And see what they think. See if you can move them to think about things in different ways based on what you believe in and what you think is important. And the best advice I could give to somebody of any age is to really dig deep on what you care about. Whether it's an issue, or whether it's a person you believe in, whether it's a problem you think needs to be solved, or a place you care about a lot. Dig in on that issue, learn as much about it as you can, and then do whatever you can to make a difference on it. And sometimes that means running for office, and sometimes it means something else. But take that opportunity, and it'll lead you to the chance to have tremendous meaning in your work.
I also have to say, Jonah, as a middle school teacher, you carry so much moral weight to just by being a young person. You look at people in positions of power. You look at your teachers, your parents. And you say, you have a responsibility to take care of me. You have a responsibility to take care of this planet and this country, this democracy. And I might not be able to vote, but I still have a voice. And that's why I always took my students so seriously, because there's a lot of moral weight to their voice and their concerns. So make sure you hold those people in positions of power to task. People, I get this question a lot right now. Deborah from Florida, how's your mom?
So my mom's doing great. Just saw her. She lives right here in the neighborhood. She has provisionally acquired a dog who is provisionally named Seamus. Reminds us a little bit of Truman. He's a rescue, came up through Kentucky. Still kind of finding his feet over there, but seems to be doing all right. And so does Mom. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. All right. Great. So what should the government be doing right now to help the millions of people who have been and will be affected economically by this pandemic that comes from Taylor in Missouri?
All right, so there are a whole bunch of things, and this is really important because Congress is about to take up the next round, the so-called phase 4 of economic assistance. What's been done so far is important, but it is not enough. We need to make sure that we're directly supporting individuals with continued cash support. We need to make sure that we are supporting employers and, most importantly, supporting employees through employers. So we can't just be forking out large dollar sums to businesses just because. We want businesses to be able to be made whole, but crucially, we have to make sure that that is for supporting individual employees, and that connection is really important. We've also got to recognize that those who are most vulnerable now are often those who've been most vulnerable all along. The lower wage workers, communities of color, people who live in underserved areas in the country. And that's why we got to make sure that we are shoring up the resources that people rely on, whether we're talking about the Postal Service, which is absolutely going to need to be supported through congressional action, or whether we're talking about public health resources that have been starved for far too long. And all of us will have an opportunity to weigh in with members of Congress. This shouldn't be a partisan issue. Maybe it will be under this president, but we can't let anyone from any party fail to step up and support those who are most in need. And we've got to make sure there's oversight. I'm really concerned by the president's actions to apparently weaken the oversight capabilities, because we're talking about huge sums of taxpayer money that are about to be spent. We have an opportunity not just to make sure they're spent well, but to make sure they too are spent in ways that lift up those who have been historically excluded and set us up well for the future. Let me mention one other thing that's not getting a lot of attention, but I hope it does soon. There are a lot of, you remember in the campaign, we talked a lot about national service. There are a lot of people who are now being sidelined from national service. For example, Peace Corps volunteers who have been called back, and VISTAs and AmeriCorps volunteers who can't do the work that they had been doing. And so there's just now beginning to be some work in Congress, and I'll be lending my voice when there's a chance to ways to wire that up. People who are ready to do something with the tremendous need out there. and making sure that we route that public spirit toward dealing with this pandemic and supporting those who are most in need, whether it's a health need, a child care need, a basic economic or hunger need, or anything else that could be met.
So we only have time for one more question, but I do want to ask you before we go, before we get to Kelly's question. You've been doing a pretty good job of finding a routine and a rhythm since we've been home, and you've been very dialed into everything that's going on. I'm wondering what gives you hope right now. You are a very hopeful candidate on the road. That's why I love you very much. I think it's why so many other people enjoyed following you, that you exude hope. What gives you hope right now, especially someone like yourself who's very dialed into what's going on?
Well, there's no question it's a tough time, but the big thing that I draw a lot of hope from is that everybody is finding ways to contribute how they can. And by the way, if that's just within the context of a family and making sure that loved ones who are shut in are hearing from you, that's a big deal. But I have seen so many different volunteer organizations, faith communities, even if prevented from physical gathering, still finding ways to chip in or do something. Everything from veterans I've talked to who are looking at how to recreate the concept of an intelligence fusion cell and use it to help mayors get access to public health resources, to people in a nonprofit here in South Bend that taught sewing skills, where they retooled the whole operation to make medical masks almost overnight. So many people are seeking and finding ways to make a difference. And if all of us brings what we've got, even though we have to be really original in putting it to work, I believe that's what it's going to take for us to get through this. And it's what fills me with hope that we can do this better.
All right. Kelly from Ohio, joy was my favorite rule of the road. It's hard to find joy right now. What are you doing to stay joyful?
Well, I think, different people find joy in different ways, but for us, certainly time together, time with loved ones is really important. Time speaking to people in our lives. I've been reunited since we've all kind of discovered the pros and cons of video conferencing. I've been reconnected with people in my life who I hadn't seen their face in a very long time. And something about realizing you don't have to go anywhere to have a reunion with people you knew from way back when has been really special. And it is a good time to read and write, to look at what has always brought you joy. And I think it's okay to, on one hand, I'm immersing myself in a lot of public policy and public health issues, but I think it's also okay to find goofy, sugary sources of joy in life, and between a healthy amount of TV watching and an awful lot of cooking, we're finding all kinds of things that keep us grounded.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we don't put pressure on ourselves right now. We've been trying to tell folks who we're talking to, like, it's okay to just focus on being okay. You don't have to come out of this, being the best baker of sourdough. And having your summer bod ready, just taking care of yourself and the people around you. For us, it's been fun to be supporting local restaurants, ordering out and ordering like local beans from the local roaster, and just trying to support as many small businesses in town as possible. This has been fun. It's really nice to see the community connecting once again. And I will just say, as your husband, we haven't really talked politics very much since we got home, but I'm very happy to see you active again. I'm so glad you're kicking off this PAC effort, because there's so many people, as you see in the comments tonight, and so many people who are on the call that just need this continued leadership and hope. And it's a pleasure to see you do it. And it's a pleasure to share that community with everyone else. So I will turn it over to you so you can give your closing remarks. Enjoy. And it's been nice to share this virtual time with everybody tonight. Buddy and Truman are making a lot of moans, but I think they're ready for dinner. So take care, everybody. You got it.
Okay, come on. Well, let me close just by thanking you again for what this community supporters means. And again, there's a lot of, there they go. There's a lot of power in this community, in the ability to draw attention to issues that matter, to mobilize, to support those we want to lift up. Again, whether it's making sure that we get the White House in the right hands, or with your help, I hope having a very strong effort with Win the Era that's going to help us back a lot of people, some of whom won't be household names, but will deserve the help. And again, if you can lend a hand through wintheera.com in this time, I know it's challenging for a lot of folks, but if you're able to help, please do. Give us your feedback. We're learning new ways to engage too. Political campaigning has gone through so many changes in American history, from the 19th century, when it was actually considered a little impolite for candidates to campaign directly, and you'd have to go to somebody's front porch to see them, even if they were running for president, to the days of the whistle stop tour and campaigning by train, to this moment we're in, where we're learning how to be politically active and to raise our voices in advocacy, even if we have to do it from our own homes. This is an opportunity for us to find new ways to make a difference. And so we hope to actively continue hearing from you too. This, I believe, is just the beginning. I think that our campaign is just the beginning of the creation of a community of people bound by the same values, bound by a commitment to a future of belonging and a better era. This is our chance to create the kind of 2020s that America is going to need and that the world's going to need in order for us to be able to look back from the 2050s and say that we got there. And I know that I can look to you in so many different ways to help make that happen. And your presence in this conversation tonight is just one of many examples. So thank you so much. Please stay in touch with us and with each other. Please stay safe and healthy. And I'm looking forward to one day being able to say hello in person too. Take care.